So
Brought to you
you got
by kombucha.
sponsorship? I was gonna
Yep,
say.
sponsor kombucha this round. Synergy. Fucking rolling in the money already, dude.
Fantastic.
Episode 4. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about your experience with the going to do that martial arts thing in Paris, and you had some commentary that I thought might be interesting and useful.
I had some commentary. Yeah, I did. It was a martial arts workshop with 10 masters, just outside of Paris, actually, in a really pretty part of the country. And it was in an Aikido school
Hmm.
that had a great big gymnasium that had been done up into an Aikido style room. They had a big gong in the middle of the room, and they had the teachers teaching hour and 15-minute courses back to back for 24 hours. So there'd be a 15-minute break, and it started at noon, and it went all night until noon the next day.
All night?
Yeah, it was called 24-Hour Samurai. And so there were some people who like pushed through and did everything. But most people took like a break, you know. I took the first 4 classes, and then I slept. I got a good night's sleep. And then I got up in the morning and I did one more jujitsu class, and everything else I just watched.
Where did you sleep?
I slept. They had like this one room that was designated a rest area, just like a quiet area. And I just had like a blanket and a pillow in there and slept on the floor.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, it worked. It was good enough. I was able to get some sleep, even with the craziness going on throughout the night. And I missed some of it. I didn't. There was I think one, maybe 2 teachers that I didn't see. But I know one, Silat something, some self-defense martial art.
Yeah.
And anyway, so my experience was really one of watching cultish behavior unfold before my eyes in different degrees, and in a way that seemed pretty happy and harmless and generally like enjoyable for the people there. It seemed like good vibes. It didn't seem like anything like nefarious was happening. It seemed fine, but true, it wasn't. Honest, it was not.
Yeah.
The one exception that I saw being the jiu-jitsu guy, who was a 3rd-degree black belt, and he put on a class that was genuinely useful. 2 classes that were genuinely useful.
Yeah.
Teaching basics to a big room full of like 200 beginners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's why I brought it up. I wanted to talk about the tendency in the martial world for their, well, you know, the bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
There's martial arts, and most of it's bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
what I mean by that is kind of like the more I look, and then it's in different circles too. And you know, I don't necessarily need to pick on martial arts. It's just that's where I have a lot of experience, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the crap, and it doesn't. And so I wanted to expose the crap for what it is, and try to communicate the power of not
Crap.
not with the crap. Like, for example, like, so I've got a gripe, or I've got gripes in the sense that, like, in the martial arts, you know, I come via Ralston, definitely a trained fighter. I've also messed around at MMA gyms and stuff like that, and there's a big difference between people who actually fight and then people who do martial arts and then fantasize about fighting. Or like there are some Kempo guys that I went to go see if they would play with me. Like I challenged some of the guys in there, and they said, no, we can't play with you because our techniques are too deadly.
Yeah, that's one of the things.
And this is some of the crap. You see, and then why? But my I guess my thing is like, why the crap? Why the shit? Like, I've even heard stories in the science community of, and I'm not clear exactly, but it's like some scientists will prefer their brand of science because it fits with what they believe. And other people's science, it's like it just isn't right. It's not the right kind of science. I'm like, bro, you're a fucking scientist. What are you doing? Science is about not that, but here you are, a scientist, and still locked into some fucking idea about the right kind of science or something like, and it's like based on a belief or based on belief systems.
Yeah.
Or like the martial arts, it's like based on a belief about, well, this technique is deadly. Oh yeah, go do that on that dude over there who knows Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He'll tie you into a fucking pretzel. And what are you going to gouge his eyes out while your arm is locked up and you're getting choked? Go ahead. They go, come on, try it out. And it doesn't work. Say. But it's like this tendency to believe. And I think as humans, we have that. It's like it's easier to believe. And once a belief is locked in, it definitely has the quality of being like an overlay on reality. So that then the world looks as if consistent with the belief. And it's just, so.
Yeah. I think that most people are pretty disposed towards following authority. Majority of people.
There is that.
And we were so geared up for it. And I think it's because there's a survival advantage and an evolutionary advantage to being geared up to follow authority for the most part. We're really delicate creatures. A human being in the wild alone isn't like a bear in the wild alone. A bear in the wild alone can take care of itself pretty well. A human being cannot. A human being needs other human beings. And so social structures are really important. And hierarchy is a part of that. Authority is a part of that. And they did a test. I was listening, I think it was in Berkeley. I think it was in Berkeley back in the 70s, where they said they were going to have a social experiment where they put an advertisement out where they said you would get paid not very much. It was like $4 an hour. Of course, at that time that was more, and it would be like a few hours of work, and you could go in. And they had these people go in, and they would have two candidates come into a room, and there'd be like a doctor there with like a doctor's coat, a scientist, a white coat or whatever. And he would ask them to draw some papers out of a can or a box or something. And one said learner and one said teacher. And they were told that it was a memory test. And so one of them got the learner paper and the other one got the teacher. And the learner was taken to a room and rigged up to a chair that would administer electric shocks.
Okay.
And the teacher was told in another room, couldn't see the learner, saw him once, and then went into another room and couldn't see him. And then was told to give him instructions to memorize stuff. And it would start out easy and the learner would get it right. But eventually the learner would make a mistake. And then the guy in the lab coat would tell the teacher to administer a low voltage electric shock.
Okay.
Virtually everyone who went into the experiment would administer that low voltage electric shock.
Yeah.
And the person who was getting shocked would make a noise because, you get shocked. And I guess the wall was thin enough you could hear.
Okay.
Between the walls. And the teacher would go on and eventually the learner would make another mistake. And this time, the guy in the lab coat would say, crank it up to 30.
Right.
Almost everybody would do it.
Yeah.
Crank it up to 45. Almost everyone would do it.
Yeah.
65% of the people who were brought in would conduct the experiment and continue administering the shocks until the person was screaming bloody murder, and they would even continue to administer shocks after the person had gone silent.
Okay.
65%.
It's a little fucked up.
Yeah. Now, the person would argue, usually most people would argue, but at the end of the day, the majority of people would cave
Because
and administer electric
perceived
shocks to a point that they could no longer hear a screaming individual scream, because he had stopped screaming, it stopped making any sound. Now, it turns out that the guy who was getting electrocuted was not getting electrocuted. He was a scientist.
Okay. And they knew when the...
But the person who was doing the teacher did not know that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, okay, interesting. The place where that shows up for me here, like when I do workshops, it's a little bit creepy, because after, like, once we get going, people are coming in, they get settled in, but then I start doing the work, and then by day 3, 4, I can tell that the people hold me in a certain authority, because, like, granted, I do my job, I do it well. They start to hold me as an authority, and they'll start asking me questions about, like, how should I live my life, and and what do I do about this, and they're genuinely interested in. But more than that, I can sense in the room that I could feed them a line of bullshit and they would buy it. Mm-hmm. That's the fucked up part. And I go like, oh God, yeah, there it is. Mm-hmm. That same quality of believing, and you know, especially like in this consciousness work or whatever, you know, I become like a whatever enlightened authority on some matter, and then they perhaps prescribe, the participants would give me that status, because it doesn't happen unless they give it to me, but because I'm the guy at the front of the room, they do that. So then I'm like, holy smokes, yep. And then I could, and that's now I know about people that just do fantasy bullshit. Yep. It's once that authority's locked in, it's an easy sell. People they fucking eat it up, and they want to be told what to do.
Yeah, I think it feels secure. It feels meaningful to be a part of something.
True.
And I think the majority of people need authority in their lives.
Yeah.
I think I need authority in my life. I have a hard time motivating myself to do things that I want to do.
Yeah.
But I also have the kind of personality where I basically don't trust authority, and it's really fucking hard for me to follow. I have to have a tremendous amount of respect for the person.
Right.
And the person has got to be able to kick my ass.
Huh.
Both. That's me, but I'm rare.
Yeah,
like, most people are not like me. Yeah. I will subvert either like in a sort of sneaky way or in a direct confrontational way, authority, unless it can kick my ass and I respect it. It's a personality flaw, but it's also a benefit, depending on how it's used.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of both at the workshop, of course.
Oh, what, when you were here?
No. Oh, no, I definitely
I'm sorry. Okay, we're back. Excuse me. Yeah, plenty of that.
Yeah. No. I had a crisis of authority with Cheng Shen throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I think pretty close to the end that I really kind of like accepted and got into the groove. Definitely more than halfway.
Yeah.
both with Peter and with you. And honestly, it would never have happened if Peter hadn't been such a badass, you know.
Right.
And you in your own right, even at that time, you had a strength about you. So yeah, if that hadn't have been there, I don't think that would have. I don't think that would have lasted, and I think that's why I gravitated towards martial arts.
Right.
And I can honestly say that I don't think I ever stayed with anybody that couldn't, in martial arts, that couldn't honestly kick my ass. Not to say that there wasn't some fantasy involved, or that they didn't have some very, yeah, basically fantasy, some bullshit that they were not even aware of. I know I fell into that in a number of ways.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in this workshop, I could see that happening, and I think there's some really
You could say you could see that happening. What's the that you're talking about? The bullshit,
yeah.
the
So
fantasies, the
it's
beliefs.
yeah. So it's so um, basically people believing in things that clearly do not work. And the reason that I know they don't work is because I've done jujitsu, wrestling, and boxing. Okay. And I've never competed, but I've sparred hard enough and rolled with enough people to know that that shit doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. And I can see it. And the work that I've done in Shengshin and the work that I've done even as a dancer has helped me understand, like, you know, human movement and gravity and so forth. And I can just look and see it's like, oh, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And but the whole room is full of people that really want it to be so, and it reminds me very much of like a Star Wars convention, or like
Like a LARPing event or something.
a LARPing event, yeah, like Harry Potter or something.
Yeah.
Except, you know, in the Star Wars and the Harry Potter world, like there might be a few individuals there who are a little woohoo, like crazy, but almost everybody there knows it's just a fantasy and it's just for fun,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then conversely, you go to like a sporting club, like everybody's like horse riding, or like, yeah, horseback riding, or playing golf, or mountain biking or something. And it's not a fantasy. Like there might be some cultural traditions around it and stuff, but like if you want to ride a horse and jump over fences, you have to actually know how to ride a horse and jump over fences. And no amount of fantasy is going to help you do that.
Right.
Right? At all. So it doesn't allow for fantasy because it's a functional activity. But those are like two extremes, like Harry Potter, Star Wars, skiing, and horse riding on the other side. Martial arts is funny because it's supposedly a physical thing, but what it's supposed to be a physical thing about is about combat.
Yeah.
And if you're not actually combating, that's sort of like doing a horse jumpy thing where no one actually rides a horse and no one actually jumps over fences, but they have horses and they have fences and they have like stirrups and saddles and stuff, but nobody actually gets on the fucking horse and rides. And they
Yeah.
can make up a lot of amazing stuff, especially because it's got a culture and a history and a language attached to it, and it goes way back. And the master wears some really, really cool clothes. You know, the hair is done just right, and he talks in a specific way, and he's got people around him that seem to admire him, and they're pretty impressive themselves.
Yeah.
Don't you want to be a part of that? And
Yeah.
martial arts particularly, I think, allows, it's like this traditional martial arts that don't engage in fighting,
Yeah.
which tends to be things like, yeah, kung fu, tai chi, aikido,
Karate,
most
taekwondo.
karate, and some very particular schools of like a given kung fu school might actually do hard sparring. I saw the other day, I saw like a kung fu school that clearly did kung fu, and they clearly did hard sparring, and they clearly were able to kick ass with it.
Yeah, yeah. I've
They're
seen
the
the same with
ex-
Taekwondo too, but then it's fighting with your feet. So the
then
kickboxing.
it's fighting, and then it's not going to be that different from boxing and Muay Thai because
Yeah,
it becomes, hey, you know what? Human striking is human striking,
yeah.
and
It's gonna
it's
follow
not
some
going to
similar paths.
it's going to follow a lot of similar paths. It's sort of like you can go, there's horse riding, you've got Western saddle riding, and you've got, European riding, and you've got some other styles, but they're not that different from each other. They're
Yeah,
not that different because it's a human
maybe.
being sitting on a horse.
Yeah,
But I think martial arts that don't fight allow for a real kind of fantasy, and I think it's a really special place because people are afraid of violence naturally
yeah.
because you get hurt.
Yeah. There's yeah. Keep going.
And you want to be able to deal with that fear, but it's really easy to fall into a place where you think you're dealing with that fear and you're actually just avoiding it
Right.
and running from it. And you
Or
can get with a bunch of like-minded people who are all engaged in that avoidant activity together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just prolific throughout the various martial arts communities.
Yeah.
But they've had a real number done to them in the U.S. because of the popularization of the UFC.
Yeah.
I think the UFC has beaten up traditional martial arts schools to a large degree. And I can see a difference here in France. It's not the same. Like UFC is not popular here. And there's a lot more of that. It reminds me of the U.S. like 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Makes sense. So we can thank the Gracies for that, and then we can thank Jigoro Kano because the Gracies actually first learned their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from one of Jigoro Kano's students. Count Maida came and taught judo to the Brazilians, and then the Brazilians modified it, turned it into the Jiu-Jitsu, and the Gracies invented the damn UFC.
They did, and now the UFC is a different thing, and it's got a different rule set, and it's got a particular rule structure that doesn't even favor the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu as it was being practiced at that time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that way. They probably want more striking involved. It's more exciting.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Still pretty real though, and yeah. I think the MMA. One of my favorite guy, or what? Not my favorite, but a guy who I really appreciate. He's the dude in I think China. He's an MMA guy, and he goes around challenging traditional martial artists.
What's his name?
I don't know, but he gets death threats apparently.
Oh, really?
So, and that brought up something. Let's see. Let me find this guy who I think it's China. Challenges traditional martial artists. Hope that'll work. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna fuck up this dude's name probably. Xu Xiaodong. That's XUXIAODONG. Xu Xiaodong. Okay. I don't know how to pronounce it. Nicknamed Mad Dog, is a Chinese mixed martial artist who is known for challenging and fighting fraudulent and traditional martial artists.
Sure.
See, and apparently he gets death threats. So he'll go like, okay, like some kung fu master, and he just beats the shit out of him. It's like, see, son, like maybe. And it brought up like when there's a death threat involved, it's even worse because the principle of being a self, like in the Cheng Shin consciousness world, the survival of the individual, the survival part, the principle that drives us to be people. If I identify with martial arts, and then if I identify with fake martial arts, and it's something that I do repeatedly, I will become a martial artist. Yeah. And that which I have become must be maintained. So anything that threatens that, I have to run, but I've got to defend it. I've got to defend the thing that I've become attached to. And so it's even worse. It's even more challenging because if the thing that I get myself attached to is a fraudulent thing and I don't know it, I will be acting out a fraudulent existence without knowing it, without realizing it's bullshit. And I'll fight to keep it because I'm scared to lose it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which,
sure.
Makes the death threats. It's like, oh yeah, of course, because like if traditional martial arts, especially imagine if it was a cultural thing, you know what happens when your culture gets threatened? This is a big problem.
Yeah, people kill each other.
And it's like they kill each other.
That's the history of the human race. Yeah. Have you seen the movie Inception?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how if you start doing weird stuff in the dream, then the dream characters start noticing, and then if you do enough stuff, they come after you.
Yeah, this is wrong.
So during the Aikido class, it was so bullshit that when I didn't say anything, but when I got to where I was going to do the exercise with the guy, I was just like, okay, and I just showed him how it just doesn't work. Okay.
What did he do? What was the describe the technique?
Okay, so the technique was, all right, one partner holds his hands out pretty far, pretty
palms
distant.
Up.
Yeah, palms up. And the other partner creates a wave effect with the body that comes over on top. And by touching the hands after the wave, you can push somebody to the ground through their hands. Okay?
Yeah.
And basically everybody in the room was tanking for this phenomena.
And tanking means, if you're listening, you don't fucking know. They're going with the program. They're going with the program. People are famous for doing this.
They're going to the program. But the thing is the majority of these people were not Aikido people. But they were all traditional martial arts people who were doing karate and doing, varying degrees of fantasy.
There's that thing again, like going with the program.
Going with the program. And I just said, he was like, well, if you do the wave, it'll work. I'm like, no, dude. If you put your weight into my hands and I have my hands far extended, it will work. If I bring my hands in close to the center of my body, you got to be really damn heavy. And that is all that matters here.
And you have to remain rigid and in contact. Just if he pushes down on your hands, just let him go.
Well, yeah, but I'm just showing him that the whole pushing thing doesn't work, right? Yeah. He was saying that he can push me down into the ground with this wave power, and I'm saying, no, I can, with the strength of my biceps, stop you. I can hold up, you can hold up a heavy bar. You can hold a man at waist level,
Yeah.
You can hold somebody who's a lot heavier than you for a limited amount of time. And you're saying, well, with the wave, you can do it. And I just didn't tank. And I also showed him how he could stop me as well. And then so I had one and then the Aikido acolytes, because there's the one guy in the middle. Yeah. It was very charismatic. I mean, he looked like a samurai out of a movie, right?
Goddamn right he did.
Asian guy, beautiful flowing robe things, long hair, booming voice, very an attractive man. Let me tell you, he was a good looker, and he had some charisma and some presence, and he had 6 or 7 people going around, helping people with the technique, and so I had 2 people come up to me and try to explain to me how I wasn't doing it right and how I wasn't receptive, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And they were like, here, let me show you. Here, I can do it to you. And I'm like, no, you can't. And I even had a pretty big, strong guy, no, you cannot do this. I know you can't do this. And I just I was like, guys, it's just bullshit.
You told him?
Yeah, I just said it's just bullshit. No, it doesn't work.
And
obviously, it doesn't work. They were like, well, it's not about that. It's not. It's just about the energy. They backtracked,
Uh-huh.
And then I could
Right.
see that they were not there to create a fight. They were there to create like a good, happy time and stuff like that. But this guy that I was working with, he was kind of, I felt bad for him, my training partner, because he believed it. And I could see it on his face, you
Yeah.
know? And then I'm going, you know what? I just need to step back because I'm not going to be able to continue to play this game with these people without
Yeah.
just
You either have
I
to just
cannot
like.
resist tearing this shit apart every second, and I'm gonna end up confronting the guy in the middle of the room,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna be the one. Here's my cultural stuff. I'm gonna be the one. Yeah, I'm gonna be. It wouldn't have been good. So I just bowed and stepped off the mat and continued to watch the class.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty benign thing, but it was this, that moment of inception where they all start looking at you. That's what was happening. Like the people
Oh,
started looking at me. Oh, here's the
here's the threat.
what do you call it? Well, like in the heretic, right? The heretic.
Yeah, they start lighting the torches, getting ready,
a little
get the fucking
bit,
pitchforks ready,
bit.
like
Yeah.
the audience.
But that wasn't what I mean. It bothered me because I could see that fantasy there, and I could
Yeah.
see that need to believe in it. And it didn't bother me if people wanted to do the fantasy. Dude, I'm a nerd, right? Right? Like it's been a while, but if you get me with the right group of people and I have the
D&D, bro.
time, I will play Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like I can appreciate a good fantasy. But and I think there were some people there who could see it as a fantasy and were enjoying it, but not most of them. I think
Yeah.
most of them, they were just going for it. And there were not the Aikido people, but some other people there. It was a little abusive. I mean, it was a little physically abusive. There was some intimidation going on. There was unnecessary infliction of pain to establish dominance and hierarchy. To impress people. And the one that really pissed me off is I saw this guy, this Tai Chi Wing Chun guy, who had beautiful movement. But he was kind of beating up a woman in front of a room full of 200 people.
Yeah.
And getting applauded for it.
Right.
You know?
And you can sometimes it gets a little fucking squirrely.
And she was tanking for him. She would do like the same punch.
Yeah.
And she would leave her arms stiff out there, and then he would move 7 times to her one punch.
Mm-hmm.
And he had fast movement, but he was kind of hitting her and banging on her. And I noticed most of the people had bruises all over their arms and stuff like that, and they're taking their licks and stuff like that. And that I forget the expression that sticks in my craw. Is that what they say?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Something like that.
Something stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Grinds
gets under
of
my
gears.
skin. It gets under my skin. I don't like that. It bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah. Peter's got a story about that. Being with Robert Nadeau in Aikido school because he was doing some Aikido, and one of the guys, black belt, he put on a white belt. He's won the world tournament, all this stuff. He put on a white belt just to see how he'd get treated in there. And sure as shit, there was some like high-ranking black belt mucky mucks in there starting to do a wrist technique, and then they went to like do it, break his wrist kind of thing, and he fell back and kicked his hand off. Said, "Don't fuck with me." And like he's not gonna just stand there and let somebody break his wrist. And Robert Nadeau, the teacher, who understood the difference. I think Robert Nadeau understands the difference between traditional martial arts and fighting. Like he was I think he was in law enforcement or something where he like saw more of the reality. And he said, he saw the black belt about to do something. He was going to go confront the guy, and then he saw, oh, no, Peter can handle himself. He's fine. But like that same, I think it's because they don't fight. It's like the violence. I need to like test and see if I can be violent.
Yeah.
Because I've never had somebody choke me, break me. Like, can I actually do it so that I can like assert myself? And because like all the guys that I've met that are professional fighters, they're chill usually.
They're
They're like
mostly really chill people.
they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, I've been had my clock cleaned, I've been broken, I can break you, we're good.
Yeah.
You know, Peter mentioned the same thing hanging with some boxers in Oakland, California. He's like, went to the diner, you get bumped into, they're like, oh, excuse me, pardon me.
Yeah.
You know, all the BJJ guys, super gentle, like calm, just chill.
I think there's a little bit of a myth there too, though, because there are some people in the MMA world, the boxing world, and the jiu-jitsu world who are psychos.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Fucking nut
dangerous
jobs.
people,
Yeah.
and they'd be dangerous without those practices, but they're even more dangerous with them, and that is real too.
Yeah. I've
And
seen
they
that.
might act pretty nice in the gym because they don't want to get kicked out, but there's still, you know, violent, dangerous people outside of their sport.
Sure.
You know,
and
in
and or yeah, that to
consensual
be
ways.
fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
to be fair, I've also, you know, some guys I don't want to roll with them because they're not going to take care of me.
Hmm.
You know, they're going to go
And
fucking spastic and hurt somebody. You know, just cause.
Yeah,
That's not
yeah.
good either.
It's. I think it's important to. It's important to take care of yourself, and if you're getting into a combat sport, to go to a place where the people have a good way of working with each other, where they're going to take care of you,
Yeah.
and until you're tough enough to take care of yourself and know who to train with and who to back away from.
Yeah.
And it takes experience. Like you're not just going to know how to do that or when to do that. So you actually have to kind of be in a place where the people you got good vibes. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I tell people too. I actually did a video on this recently. Like, how do I pick a school? I mean, how do I pick a martial art to do? But then how do I pick a school? It's like, yeah, go in there, scope it out, take a look at the students. How are they acting? Is the place clean or not? How does the teacher treat the students?
mm-hmm.
You know, and you'll tell pretty quick, like, you know, do they have an awareness? Are they caring for the students, making sure that everybody's good and that they're learning? Or is it like, nah, just that, you know, among other things, you know,
Yeah.
go in, check
Yeah.
it out, scope it out, train a little
Are,
bit.
are people getting bullied? Are people getting hurt?
Yeah.
Are a lot of injuries happening? Even at highly competitive schools, I think injuries should be kept to a minimum.
Yeah. Still train hard, but
Yeah.
don't go
Yeah.
for damage.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I could say more about that, all that stuff. I've been thinking about it a lot, but that seems like a good place. Like, basically, if you're interested in martial arts and you want to do like a meditative fantasy, like you can do Tai Chi as like a meditation in motion
Yeah.
and have no illusions that you can use it in a fight. You know,
Yeah.
or you can do it with a bunch of delusions. And I recommend the former.
Yeah, it seems like that's the crux of the matter. It's not that it is a fantasy, it's that it's pretended to be something like it's
Exactly.
pretending that it's something that it's not. It's having the fantasy and then going, "Oh, because of X fantasy, therefore I'm a badass fighter," and then living the lie
Yes.
kind of thing. That's the beef that I have,
Right.
and I assume you have too. It's like, no, you're not living it for real. If I was living the fantasy for real, I'd be like, yeah, I'm fantasizing about fighting. That's what I'm doing, and I love it, and it feels great.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm a fighter. I'm just fantasizing about it. Now I'm straight with it. I'm real with it.
Well, yeah. If you're an actor, you're fantasizing
Yeah, for a living.
that's your profession.
Yeah.
And you're real about being unreal.
Yeah, and or some. I think some actors they're real good. They know how to be the thing they need to be.
Yeah.
So they're really. I mean, but they are really acting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the end of the day, you know,
So,
for a movie.
a distinction that I've been making a lot, and one of the things that I walked away from that seminar with is that there is a big difference between what I call martial arts and what I call combat sports.
Mm-hmm.
And around each combat sport, Muay Thai, boxing, there is culture, but the culture is a distant second to the main activity. Like, it's got to be there because human beings are involved and we're cultural creatures. So we're going to have all kinds of stuff attached to everything we do.
Yeah.
But the main thing is the activity. And the thing about combat sports is basically combat sports are a set of agreements around what is acceptable violence. That's
Sounds
what a
about right.
combat sport is. It is a
Yeah.
set of agreements about
And then
what is
there's also
acceptable
action.
violence. Well, yeah, then
Oh,
people go and engage in it.
they engage in. Oh, yeah, yeah. So you're talking about the structure itself, like what it is.
And it defines the kind of activity that's going to be incentivized. So you're going to see different kinds of behavior arise in a boxing match than in a Muay Thai match because different moves are allowed, right? And that's going to create different strategies.
Yeah.
That's going to create different possibilities. Some things you can do in boxing that it'd be dangerous to do in Muay Thai. You know, same thing with any other combat sports. When you put them together, you find that the key differences, what drives the change, what drives the evolution of these activities, I think, are people's adaptation to rule sets.
Yeah.
And to some extent, and then people might change the rule sets, and then it changes the thing again.
Yeah.
And you can see that a lot in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu
Yeah,
over the
like
last few
sport jujitsu
decades.
versus like submission only jujitsu, for example, or something like that.
Yeah, when you have points awarded to different positions, if you have the gi, if you don't have the gi, if you have weight classes, if you have no weight classes, just like kind of an open division, the amount of time that is allotted to the rounds, all of these things incentivize and change behavior, and people form strategies and techniques based upon that. And I think even more so than people like police officers and sometimes even soldiers, these people have experience with unarmed combat. It's bound by a particular rule set, but they're fighting all the time. Whereas a police officer might serve 20, 30 years or more on the force and hardly ever get into a real physical encounter with somebody that would come even close to the kind of intensity that an MMA fighter would face.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think the expertise happens on the mat and in the ring and in the cage. Like, pick your fighting domain. But when people are actually seeking to harm each other's bodies in the ways that it is possible to do so, which is pretty much by bludgeoning it, breaking something, or choking them unconscious,
Yeah.
will leave eye gouging and pulling on the genitals and stuff like that out, we decide that that's not acceptable violence, then we are going to develop a lot of reality checks. We're going to develop a relationship with reality that people who aren't doing those things are never going to get.
Right. Yeah, so their exposure to the reality of the situation does seem to be like a balancing force. And still, like say in boxing, you like, I don't know, you might say you can't switch feet or some such, or you
Yeah.
or this is the best way to defend yourself, like with blocking, for example, you know, and that's very popular, or covering up and whatnot.
I think that with
Like
boxing,
there's
I'm
still
no
dogma. I'm
expert
saying
about
there's
it.
still dogma, even though the combat sports are more real. There's still some of that bullshit in there. Like, and Ryan Hall is good about talking about it. He's like, yeah, if you get in somebody's guard, you need to pass their guard. He's like, why, or something like that. He's like, well, what can the person do with two arms and two legs? And I see that type of thinking is moving away from the dogma and into more the physics of it. That you can't really goof around with that. Like, two arms, two legs, a human, and there's another human. What can we do?
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's in a different direction. I mean, anyway, that's a sidebar. That's not speaking about what you were talking about with the
Well, I know. I think
people
it's
making
valid
agreements.
because that happens, but it has a way of working itself out, and that's how you see like the evolution, the change that happens in sports, over the
Yeah.
years and over the decades, and people develop different kinds of strategies. And
Yeah,
I
human
think the
laws are the same type of thing. Like you and I have a bunch of social agreements that we adhere to. Like you're wearing clothing, so am I. Why is that, I
right,
wonder?
right,
We don't
right.
just go hit each other in the street. We don't speed in our cars, although we do, but sometimes other people in cars with lights on them pull us over. And
Exactly.
now we owe them money, which is another phenomenal fucking concept.
Yeah, to that, to that.
Like now I have to give them pieces of paper that mean something, or I don't have to give them pieces of paper. I can just move a number from one screen to another screen, and somehow that means that I've lost money.
Yeah, it
So
exists all inside of language, convention,
yeah, how does that? How does
culture,
yeah?
agreement.
Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
thing is, and it's all agreed upon. There was one time we were in a like there's the gas station down here in the Easy Mart. The power had gone out,
Hmm.
so no cameras, cash register wasn't working. Everybody's standing in line. I'm like, we are real close to just somebody going, hey, you know what? I could just take this. Like the only thing keeping us from being uncivilized is an agreement that doesn't exist anywhere, by the way.
Yeah.
And
I, I
it's
don't,
only
I don't,
our agreement to continue to be nice to each other that keeps it like that.
yeah, but I don't know about that, Brendan. I think that some of these things that, like in Shengshin, the you don't get into things like science, basically. But for the most part, you leave it out. You don't really talk about things like neurochemistry. You don't really talk about things like biology very much, you know. And there's actually been a lot of research that's been done and being done on the chemical and neurological changes that happen that people go through when they do things like break agreements, when they do things like see actions that are morally repugnant to them.
Yeah,
There are really measurable physiological things that happen in the body,
yeah.
and I don't think that these things you can say don't exist anywhere. They
Well,
they exact they actually do exist in a physical way.
the chemicals exist in a physical way, but the concepts that perhaps fire the chemicals do
Well,
not.
what are the concepts made of?
They're not made of chemicals.
Are they?
No.
Maybe your perception of them isn't. I mean,
Right,
we
your
have
experience.
experience,
Right, the
but there
experience
but there is a physical substrate there. Is what I'm trying to say. There's a
only as a
thing there.
concept, unless you actually see it.
So I would check that out.
So you have because I know
I
the
would
argument.
contend that.
People have arguments about that, but I think it's like how do you square? There's chemicals, say neurons firing, right? My experience does not include neurons, it includes the movement. And then we say there's a relationship between the neurons and the movement. Sure. So what does exist is the neurons firing and the movement, but that is not the same as the experience of moving.
It's not the same as the experience.
Right. The neurons are not the same as the experience.
But nothing is the same as your experience.
What do you mean?
I mean, you give reality to arms and legs. You say it's 2 arms, 2 legs.
Right. Well, an
There's something
arm
objective there.
is not there. This is here. An arm is a thought.
Yeah. Right. But then you've got to deal with the actual physicality of real arms and legs, regardless of what you think about them, if you're going to engage in fighting or do anything that involves arms and legs.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not all just our thoughts.
The agreements are our thoughts. Yes.
The agreements and what we call things and so forth. But I guess, what am I trying to say here? I guess I've been exploring, the topics of neurochemistry and physiological effects on the body when stuff happens or when we do things. Everything from when we eat, when we don't eat, the amount of sunlight that we get, the amount of exposure that we have to people, like everything actually affects us. And it's not just our experience is that it's a thought.
Yeah.
Or that it's an experience, that it's a perception, that it's an idea, right? But maybe that idea comes way after a lot of physiological stuff has already occurred. And what we're getting is sort of like a heuristic cliff note version of the reality. See what I'm saying? Like there's a lot behind the scenes, and it could be way, way more physical and mechanical than we're thinking it is, including things like we have agreements, and those agreements are so like your thing about the store, right? Right. There's a lot more going on there than just the agreement, like at a superficial level.
Sure.
It goes down a long, long way to the time people were little kids learning from their parents, don't steal, and even earlier than that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Social embarrassment. Cultural programming, family
behavior.
programming, fear of others, fear of self-concept. Like there's a lot going on there. And so and those things, the experience of those things is going to be extremely palpable. It's going to be very, very alive for people. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you can, when people take a big enough hit or a big enough change in their psyche, you see changes happen in their physical health.
Mm-hmm.
You see changes happen that are not just behavioral. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. We're in agreement still.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think there's just a confusion. I'm just saying the agreements don't exist.
Okay.
I didn't say they weren't powerful. I didn't say we weren't going to abide by them, but you can see how quickly people go to looting when shit hits the fan. Pretty quick.
Not everyone. Some people don't.
Yeah, some people don't, and I'm just saying that is a very real possibility. And so what I was saying in the store is I'm like, oh, we're not far off from these agreements going out the window. Power's out. Cash register's just sitting there. We're all standing in line, and I just got the silliness of a bunch of people standing in line. Like, oh yeah, we think that's the thing to do. So we all line up, and then I'm just standing there in the dark. It's quiet.
So like these conventions, these can be very, very useful. But I think that I really do. I can't articulate it, but I think there's something. I think
you're getting triggered because I say the agreements aren't real, and you're like, yeah, but neuroscience and but science and all this shit. That's what I think.
Yeah, like that.
Something, yeah.
Except my version's better.
And I'm not denying the science. All I'm saying is the agreement itself, like where it actually lives. It's a concept. And yeah, maybe with these concepts, there's certain neurological shit that happens. I'm not denying that.
Mm.
But the fascinating part is how can you have something that doesn't actually exist affecting this physical form here?
And what I'm wondering is if maybe,
Does it go the other way?
mm,
I mean, no, I'm cutting you off. What were you wondering?
is maybe concepts are themselves physical, and there's a lot of physical shit that's too small for you to see. But if you look through a microscope, you can see it.
Like concepts actually exist somewhere?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get enlightened about it, you don't exist anywhere.
I know,
So
that's
neither do
weird.
concepts, neither does anything. So that's not an argument. But if we're talking about the relative
You
world
can
here,
experience them as existing, but not like, well, okay, they're not objects. That's what I'm saying.
what I'm saying is they might be objects, like literally objects. Literally. I mean objects like my wallet is an object, but objects in such a way that they're not composed of what you're used to dealing with. They're not designed, your senses are not designed to pick them up in the same way that you're designed to pick up physical objects that you navigate in the world. And yet they correspond precisely to physical phenomena. And that's a hypothesis. Like, I can't prove that, but I think that there might actually be something to that, because you can manipulate people. You can manipulate the fuck out of people, and people are doing it all the time in predictable ways, very predictable ways.
Yeah.
And to me, that means if you can manipulate concepts and you can manipulate people's behavior in predictable ways by going through specific procedures,
Yeah.
okay, then we're talking about the world of things that can be manipulated. And what's the difference between that and physicality?
Well, I've got an answer for you there.
What's that?
Humans have bunches of conceptual shit going on that is not, they're not aware of, and it's automatic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you understand the switches of the automatic mind, and it is conceptual, then if you push this switch, you know that result's going to happen. Why? Because it's automatic and they're driven to do it. Just like if you have a bunch of Trump people out there, Trump can say whatever he wants, and he knows that they're going to believe him. Why? Because they're wired up that way, and he understands how they're wired up. He can just do whatever the fuck he wants, and he knows. And so that's very predictable, but the only reason they're wired up that way is because of their concepts about who they are, the kind of person they are, what's right
I've been
and
listening.
wrong.
Okay, so check this out. So here's a kind of research that I've been hearing about.
Yeah.
If you take somebody and you have them fill out a test on their social politics, right? And you can rate them on basically how liberal they are versus how conservative they are. If you expose them to a physical, disgusting thing, like a piece of rotting meat or something like that, or like a nasty smell,
Mm-hmm.
people consistently score as more socially conservative. Consistently.
Say again?
Okay.
If you expose them to rotting
meat?
meat?
If you expose them to rotting meat, if you expose people to rotting meat, okay, to something that smells repugnant, to something that if you ate it, it would make you sick.
Yeah.
And you would potentially die, right? Or it would hurt you badly. If you expose people to that while they are taking a test about their political views, people consistently, universally,
Yeah.
pretty much score more socially conservative when they are exposed to repugnant things.
Okay.
And you can measure the degree of repugnancy that they're experiencing by things like secretion of saliva, bile in the stomach, elevated heart rate, and other kinds of stuff like that.
Okay.
Right? And when you ask these people, you can have them take the test twice. And you can say, what happened in what was the difference? Okay. They will come up with a reason of why they became socially more conservative that has nothing to do with the nasty smell.
Really?
It has to do with an experience in their social interactions with other people.
Huh.
They will invent a reason.
Yeah, people do invent shit.
They will invent the reason after they have been exposed to something that has nothing to do with social politics.
Yeah.
But it does have to do with something called like a disgust response that evolved to keep us basically from eating stuff that's going to kill us.
Yeah.
Okay, among other things. Another experiment.
If you find these, link them. Or send
I can send them to you. I've been listening to some basically researchers about this stuff, and this stuff is old. It's been going on for a long time.
Right.
You can take a person in an elevator, and they're going up to have another social experiment, another test, and they meet someone in the elevator, and it's somebody with their hands full, and that they have too many things in their hands, and they have a cup of coffee, and they hand the test subject a cup of coffee, and then the test subject, the person, goes up and talks to the experimenters, and the experimenters ask, you met someone in the elevator, and they ask questions about the elevator, height, hair color, whatever, and they ask a number of other things, and they say, on a scale from 1 to 10, how warm or cold would you rate this person's personality?
Okay. Yeah,
and it is consistently correlated with whether it was iced coffee or hot coffee that was handed to them.
Yeah.
And this is just one example, dude. There's so much stuff
then
like
yeah,
this.
then I think I was correct in my assumption way back at the beginning, where it does seem to me to be the case that in one sense my concepts influence the physical that my body is. Like it can go that way. And based on your descriptions here, it does also seem, and it makes sense, I am also relating to my environment. So if I have something cold in my hand, I will be experiencing something cold, and that will influence how I see said person. Say, oh, they're a cold person. Because somehow it goes the other direction. It does seem to work like in loops, like in that sense where it's like here's a cold experience as if moving this way just to give directionality. I don't know about all that shit, but cold, I'm registering cold, therefore what I'm seeing is a cold person. The cold has an overlay. You're cold now, and I will see cold person.
Yeah.
And that is something like physical in my experience that is then affecting out there. And it also works the other way, where if I have a certain concept built up about you, I could see you one way, and if I access other concepts about you, I will see you again differently, and both seem to be the case.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So then I'm making up some stuff about the meat. So people who are conservatives probably have a disgusted experience, ergo pain. I imagine disgust is about being in some kind of pain. Like disgust is a weird pain.
Yeah, it's a response that's it's one of the most fundamental emotions, because if you are totally without disgust, you may do something, imbibe something toxic that'll kill you. So it's really advantageous to have an experience of disgust when it's appropriate, and it's more advantageous to have more disgust than is necessary than less disgust.
Yeah,
Yeah.
make sure you really don't do that thing. Like, don't go
And
there.
it doesn't just show up in terms of food. It also shows up in terms of like mating partners. It's connected to what we call racism. It's connected to ethnocentricity. People will you
What's
can measure
ethnocentricity? Ethnocentric.
basically like when you recognize people who are close to your like genetic kin group.
Okay.
You like it's proven that we experience more um, uh, um, what is it? Basically, we have more like mirror neuron response. I may be screwing this up, dude.
I think I get you. Yeah, and I like if I see a white guy,
yeah.
I'm like, oh, I've got recognition there. I can understand, your facial expressions. I get it. We're closer than if I see a black guy or whatever they say, person of
Well,
color.
it's worse than that. Like they've done experiments where they show a needle going into somebody's hand, and if the skin tone and we have a measurable pain response to when we're hurt. There are chemical changes in the body,
Yeah.
but we also have similar chemical changes when we see other people get hurt.
Yeah.
We like, you've ever seen somebody, like you're watching an MMA fight, somebody gets hurt, you're like you can't help it. You
If
see
it's
something,
a bad one, it's like, ooh,
yeah, and you feel it. You feel it,
oh, that wasn't
right?
good.
You go, and it
Yeah.
feels like, like it's a thing, right? It's involuntary,
Like, oh, that just broke.
right? So when people see a needle entering the hand or entering the skin of somebody with the same skin tone as theirs, they feel that more than with somebody who has a different skin tone.
So they can recognize finer and finer degrees.
They don't
skin tone.
empathize with other people's pain that aren't as much like them.
Yeah.
Basically, on an involuntary level, not a conscious level, but like an involuntary
automatic
level.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Which
anyway,
perhaps could lend some, it's like maybe it's easy. Like from that, I could draw a conclusion that it's easy to be racist, say. If that's the case, if it's like, oh, I empathize more with people of the same color on a biological level, good. Then I'm predisposed toward biologically to be in favor of these people, less in favor of those. Not like biologically speaking, and then I could see that having easy carryover into the conceptual world of, oh, now I'm against this whole group of people because they're different.
Well, yeah, people. You could take that in research, and you could use
but
it
I'm
to justify
I'm not using.
racism.
Yeah, one could, and I'm not in
or
favor
to combat
of that.
it.
Yeah. I'm not saying that people who are racist, you don't have to be racist, but there may be a biological tendency to want to protect your own. I get that. But then this whole racism thing takes it to another level. A lot of concept there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know all about it. I guess my overall
like I'm talking
point,
real racism here, not like I don't know.
Yeah,
Whatever that is.
Well, you see chimpanzees waging war and committing effective, like, small-scale genocide on each other. So, like, combat and serious conflict is happening in species that are similar to ours.
Yeah.
But I don't know where I'm going with this, except to say that, yeah, I think what you were saying, it's not just that the concepts affect the biological structure. The biological structure affects the concepts, and it's proven that we can have we can make up stuff. We can just absolutely make up stuff to justify our actions.
Yep. Yeah, easy. Easy peasy.
When the only thing that really changed was a physiological thing.
Yeah, and then there's like some experience, like one of the challenges I think, is the difference between what is actually the object and what is the concept. Because concepts completely dominate the experience that we have, you can't see. Like if we had no concepts, we wouldn't see the same world. You know, like for example, you know, one of the things I use, like say in a workshops, for example, if I write the word HI here and you know English, you have to see language. And it's a sight. It is no joke. It's like it's sight and you can't change it. Like if you say, go ahead, try, and then that's made up and it's a concept, and yet the whole vision is dominated. You don't see this, you see a shirt.
Yes, but
And it's so locked in.
so I have now I have a very different experience of that, because I've been in the world and I've been learning in it, and I resist it, but the experience of learning is like a physical thing. You think of it as this conceptual thing, but it feels like a very, very physical thing, including reading. Like when I like, you know how when you're boxing, you have to make a change from when you're boxing to when you're doing jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Like you have to make a significant change in how you conduct yourself. And you have to like kind of create different feelings and different relationships.
Oh, you think feelings are physical?
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to create, or maybe I think physical is feelings. Like you've got to create different physical feelings in order to box well versus to jiu-jitsu well. And they better be the right ones. I'm not talking about sentimental feelings here. I'm talking about like functional feelings, right?
The kind of shit that gets you to kick ass, or not.
And or not. And you got to do it if you want to switch, like from like I was a dancer. If you want to go from like the waltz to like salsa, that's like a really different feeling.
Yeah.
And you've got to create that in your body.
Yeah.
And the deeper it goes, the better it is.
Yeah.
And French feels like that up until including reading.
And you think that's physical?
That feels very physical to me.
Right. I don't see that as physical. It's something.
It's
it's something that's done with the mind. You generate a state and you feel it.
Yeah.
The body.
What's the difference between the body and the mind, man? I don't know. I don't know what the difference is between the body and the mind. Because when I'm reading, sometimes I look at a sign, and sometimes I'm trying to read. I'll see something in English, but I expect to read, and I can't read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Okay.
Because I have
Say
switched.
that again. Say that again.
Sometimes I see something in English.
It's in English.
And I expect to read, and I can't read it. I'm trying to read, but I don't do it voluntarily. I'm in the mind,
thinking,
and it feels different. Also, when I step fully into, it feels like walking into a room. It feels like stepping into a different room because my mind has to switch.
Yeah.
It feels different. The pronunciation of the language. People have a different musculature to their faces than Americans.
Yeah.
And the reason is because the pronunciation of the language demands it.
They got to make different sounds,
They got to make different sounds.
Different shapes with their mouth.
It's visible. And when I see, and when I get really into it, I find myself doing that and mirroring them, not just auditorially, but visually.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a physical sense, like in the same way when you watch somebody do a technique and you try to totally like get that technique and adopt it as yours, you got to physically step into that. It's like putting on some clothes or something.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by feeling. That's what I mean by feeling. I don't know if that's what other people mean by feeling, but that's what I mean by feeling. And to me, that's a physical thing. Yes, there's a conceptual element to it because I can talk about it and I have names for it. but I could call it something else. I still got to do it,
Yeah, you got to do it.
right? And when I do it, it's a physical doing. Even
Right.
reading is a physical doing. Here's another piece of research that they did.
I still don't think it's an object like you think it is.
When people read silently in their heads, while they read, they make minute sounds with their vocal cords.
Makes sense.
Even when you read silently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that which came first? Conceptual thinking or physical speech?
I don't think they rise together.
No?
You can't have speech without having language.
If you look at
why
tracks,
make one come first or second?
well, if you look at language, if you look at like the actual history of words, you can see that most words start as meaning something pretty objective, and then they change
Sure, yeah,
over
go to the
time
history,
to mean
right.
more and more abstract
Conceptual,
things.
yeah.
And
And I bet with social media, it's getting worse and worse because now we live highly conceptual,
yeah, it's
very
more and more.
non-objective existence, which I think would probably explain a lot of the mental fucking disorder and disease.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we're
for
caught up
sure.
in concepts and not very grounded in reality.
Yeah.
Just a sidebar. Just thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still disagree, or I think I disagree in the sense that, like, I think you think it's an object, but it's not actually an object. I'm not discounting that you have to feel differently. I'm not discounting that you have to do it and that you make a shift. But if we take a corpse and say, speak, corpse, can't do that.
No, because
So
the
that's
corpse is
what's
innate.
there. Yeah.
No, that's not what's there.
Yeah, the body is there.
No.
The person
Yeah,
is
it's a
gone.
body. No, the dead body is there, and that's very different than a living body, and that's about as different as a running river and a dried up river.
Body in a coma. It's
Okay.
live. Speak.
Yeah, but
Cannot.
no, but there are physiologically different things going on there too.
Yeah.
Like the brain is not functioning to the
yeah,
same
the person's
degree.
gone.
The brain is not functioning to the same degree. Your experience of being a person is gone.
Yeah.
Your experience has changed.
Yeah.
Okay? Was there ever a person there at all?
Well, who knows? I guess people are just going to have to come to a workshop and find out.
Maybe
Link
so.
in the description. Come on down. You see, that's what I mean. The person, like, this thing is mostly, it's the concept. Yes, there's my body. And the feelings, say if I'm doing boxing, is something I have to generate, I would say, with my mind. But I don't say it exists like a physical thing anywhere.
Well,
I do it, and it makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, granted, when I say physical, I mean physical.
Oh yeah, maybe I should have clarified.
More like water or wind or electricity. Like I don't mean that it's like like literally a solid object.
Oh.
I'm talking about like actual chemicals. So it's going to have a different kind of substance than what you're used to. It's going to be like the air is physical.
All right. Well, what tells the chemicals to do their thing, huh?
I don't know. What tells anything to do anything? As far as I can tell, no one's actually in charge.
Don't tell them. Don't tell them the secret.
just what's it look like to me. And believe me, I do the Christian thing just for fun things all the time. But really,
Yeah, who is in charge over there, really? We don't know, but you can find out.
Yeah. I don't know what the chicken or the egg kind of thing. I don't know how to answer that. Or it's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I
I
enjoy.
don't know if it makes any difference because regardless of, I mean, if I took this to the ultimate conclusion, and I'm not saying that this is true,
Yeah.
but to the ultimate conclusion would be that, consciousness essentially doesn't exist. There is nothing subjective
Yeah.
at all, period. There's just,
If you're talking you're
you're,
talking consciousness now.
I'm just talking reality. I'm just talking
Yeah.
truth. Like if you go to the ultimate, like there's
There's
all
like
there
nothing
is
there.
just is objectivity, and objectivity is relative, and that means it's going away. So everything falls down. The absolute, the relative, the objective. Fuck it. There's no real difference except relatively.
Right.
And so what? You could kind of go at it from any angle, and they'd all be equally useless. But some people hold that there's nothing like free will. There's no person there. There's nothing there, so to speak. There's no you, there's no me,
Oh yeah.
and it's everything is just caused by chemical reactions, and that's what life is. It's just a series of complex chemical reactions
Yeah.
taking place, and there's just sort of this illusion that exists that we are somehow agents in this existence, and we're
Right.
not. We're just continually telling ourselves a story to justify and explain the actions, but it's like a narrative that doesn't actually relate. It's a heuristic at best, designed to kind of keep us functioning for long enough to reproduce, which is what living beings are designed to do before they die. And voila, it works well enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be fancy. I can't prove that wrong. I also can't prove it right.
Yeah. Well, where I go with that, like say the free will or whatnot, it's like that's all well and good, but then I might be, well, isn't that a thought you're having?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Now we're thinking or something like that, and then I hit him with a stick or. Well, what about the stick? Oh,
Yeah, it's a
I
thought.
don't know.
That's a
Yeah, the
stick.
stick is a thought, is it? Bow. But yeah, no. So yeah, I get.
But even if there
Oh,
is no agency whatsoever,
right. Like nobody's running the show.
nobody's running the show.
Yeah, there's still a show though.
There's still a show. That's wild.
Yeah, isn't that fucking weird?
There's still apparently at least an
There's a
audience for one.
there's or an audience for none, I guess.
Or an audience, yeah, an audience of one that isn't anything.
Yeah, it doesn't.
This stuff doesn't make sense, man. It's
But there
beautiful.
are,
To be
there do,
serious.
it is beautiful. I agree, agreed. And it does seem that there's rules.
Yeah,
There's objective rules, like rules that objects follow, and there's also rules that concepts follow. There's
yeah,
rules that existence
yeah.
follows that you can't. That's just the way it goes.
Right.
And
I
that
remember
can be
this.
discovered.
Yeah. There's. I can't remember the name of the movie. There's a movie and there's some priest or something, and he's talking to some guy and he's giving him advice, and he's like, "After all my years, the only thing I really know is this: there is a God, and I'm not him. Me, like I didn't make up the rules, son."
Oh,
Like,
that's what he means.
yeah, it's like,
I'm like,
well, that's
dude,
what I took away
dig
from it.
deep enough, bro. You might find out you are God. We don't know.
You might find out you are God, but even if you do find out you are God, like, did you create gravity? Go ahead and uncreate it. You
Yeah,
know,
that's a different deal.
you know what I'm saying? It's like it doesn't look to me like I've got any real mastery of the universe. I can't even guarantee what I'm gonna do, what I call me, from one moment to another, if I'm gonna, fart or not.
Yeah, you do have a pretty good idea, but then yeah, there's other stuff going on, and that yeah, I mean, we call that the problem of identity.
What do you mean?
Like you know, I didn't create gravity, but maybe I did. Just depends on what it
Yeah.
is you're calling you in this case.
Yeah. And you don't want to, or have no reason to stop gravity.
Nope.
It's doing its thing.
Yep. Leave
Yeah.
it alone.
And Brendan doesn't get to decide.
That's goddamn right. I don't.
But Brendan does get to play in the game of gravity.
That's right. I get to live within an objective world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. What do you want to do? You want to keep going? I could keep going. You ready to stop?
I think we can stop now. I think we've
Yeah.
got an hour and a half and navigated all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some something to pull out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's like the beef, maybe the struggle or the beef is something to the effect of, if I am committed to a fantasy and pretending that it's something it's not, then I'm living a pretense. And there does seem to be some power in not pretending. Or maybe not necessarily power, because I can see a certain power in fantasies. Like if you want to control a bunch of people, obviously, like give them a fantasy to believe in, and everybody believes in that. Good, now you can control them. That's a certain kind of power. So it has its own power. But what I mean by that is there's a certain consequence to being real versus not. And if real is something that you want, then you have to confront real. And the tendency to believe is in the other direction of what is. It's a belief about what's true, or belief about what is. And it never is the thing itself. And so if I want something that's real, I have to move in the direction of what is, not what I think is, or not what I believe to be. And then if I do that, then I will get something more real. And there's consequences. You know, one of my big things apparently is consequences to that. Like, I live a real life, not a fake one. And there are many ways I can trick myself. Like, you know, you talking to me the other day in that uncomfortable way, you see, but it was good because it got me thinking. And I was like, and I noticed some other places where it's like I had fooled myself. Like, oh, I'm just trying to say go in the back door and like really not go out into life. And but the thing is, more importantly, pretending that I was not doing that. Whereas now I can get a little more straight with myself. Okay, this is what I'm doing. Good. I'm not doing this thinking it's that. So it's like a deconfusion. And now it's like, okay, well, how do I want to be then? Because before I have no choice but to do the fakery and not realize it. And I don't get the opportunity to see it necessarily unless something comes in that doesn't fit with the program, and maybe I'm willing to look and then also willing to take the feedback and go, wait a minute, I'm a little bit wise to myself. I know I'm up to some shit. What they're saying makes sense. It kind of hurts a little. It checks out. I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. I'm fucking up here, fucking, you know, in terms of integrity or being real with what I'm doing. So that's like, I think the message is, I'm making that the message.
Sounds like a good message.
Yeah.
Be real.
Yeah. If
Be
you
more
want.
real.
Yeah. It seems worth it. Not easy though. It's much easier just to believe shit. Really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if they're listening to you, then chances are there's at least an idea of wanting to get real.
Yeah, the idea of it, the concept about it, right?
It's at least an idea. Hey, that sounds like a good idea. Get real.
Yeah.
You mean go that way?
Yeah.
You mean go the way I want?
No,
But
you.
In this like slightly new way?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Cool.
All right. Well,
All
we
right,
can
so-
wrap this. I'll shut the recording.
Okay.